All right. Hello, everyone. And on behalf of the Department of English at The Ohio State University, thank you for joining us for this English Alumni Panel. I'm Dr. Katie Stanitz, the Undergraduate Program Manager in English, and I'll be the moderator for this panel. We're recording this webinar and we'll share the video on the department YouTube page. Attendees, you're muted and your video is off. I'm thrilled that you're all joining us to hear from our wonderful alumni who are here to speak about their career paths. We always love to welcome our alumni back, and we especially love to hear what they've gone to do after graduation. We always say that there's nothing that you can't do with an English major, but carving out a path from so many different options can be really daunting. And so that's why I'm so thrilled to have our panelists here today to share their stories. Your journey might not look exactly like theirs, but we hope that they'll inspire you to find your own specific route. We'll begin with each of our alumni speaking about their career paths and how they got from their English B.A. to where they are today and what their professional roles look like today. Then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. And I have some questions that were submitted ahead of time, and we encourage attendees to submit questions here. You may submit a question at any time and we'll address them at the end. To submit a question, please click the Q&A at the bottom of the screen and submit your comment or question. We may not be able to respond to every comment and question, but we'll do our best to address as many as possible. So we have two alumni speakers here with us tonight, and I'll introduce both of them before they speak. We'll start with Brandy Davis. Brandy Davis has worked at United Way of Central Ohio for 5 years, where she currently serves as the Senior Manager of Volunteer United. With over 7 years of volunteer management experience, Brandy leads United Way of Central Ohio's volunteer efforts to connect corporate partners and community members to essential volunteer opportunities. Her primary focus is managing the new Volunteer United platform in an effort to harness the power of our community and increase the capacity of the United Way of Central Ohio's partners. Prior to joining this team, Brandy worked for Godman Guild, an agency partner of the United Way of Central Ohio. There, she was an integral member of the development department, leading volunteerism, donor recognition events, and marketing efforts. Brandy attended The Ohio State University and received a Bachelor of Arts. In 2018, she received her certification in volunteer administration. She is a graduate of United Way of Central Ohio's Project Diversity Program, Cycle 27. Brandy has a heart for bringing people together, lifting others up, and being an advocate for resources and social awareness in the Central Ohio community. Thank you so much for being here, Brandy, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that introduction. So before I talk a little bit about kind of my career path and how I got to kind of where I am today, I do want to preface this by saying, you know, when I was in my undergrad, when I was working on my English degree, I had no idea that I was going to end up going into the nonprofit space. And so, you know, as you're thinking about what you want to be doing moving forward, there's so many, and I know Katie mentioned this, there are so many different directions and ways that, you know, paths that you can go down when you're, you know, looking at your career and how you want to best leverage your English degree. And so I'll start with kind of where it all started. My career path actually started, I would say, around my junior-ish senior year at OSU. During my junior year, I, of course, was an English major, and I hadn't declared, I don't think at that point I hadn't declared a minor, and I joined the professional writing minor. Of course, that's part of the English department. And so one of the things that drew me to the professional writing minor was that not only through that minor were they really going to help me to hone my professional writing skills, but part of the minor, by the end of it, is they connect you with a local internship. So during my senior year, I actually started interning at the Godman Guild, which is a local nonprofit. They specialize in supporting families and individuals, specifically through adult education and supporting after-school programs and summer programming. And so while I was at the Godman Guild, I interned there for just under a year. I was a communication specialist intern. And one of the really cool things about interning at a smallish to medium-sized nonprofit is that, you know, being a part of the development department meant that I wasn't just focused on fundraising, but I had to wear so many different hats. I did fundraising, marketing, events, really you name it, and I did it. And it was great because I was able to learn so much and leverage a lot of the skills and tools that I was learning in my professional writing minor and just within the English department. And so about a week or so before I graduated with my English degree, I was offered a job at the Godman Guild. And so there I worked for a little over 2 years. And so while when I became a full-time employee, my role had transitioned to development, volunteer, and events coordinator. And much like my time there in my internship, I did so many different things, and it was such a worthwhile experience. I learned a lot. My days were all very different. They could be anywhere from writing donor solicitation letters to helping with producing marketing materials, as well as doing some film production and some light software development. So I really did just about anything you can think of, whether that be leveraging my verbal or written communication skills. So about 5 years ago, I actually started working for the organization that I'm with now, and that is United Way of Central Ohio. They are a local nonprofit that partners with over 95 organizations, nonprofits, all throughout Central Ohio. And it just so happens, of course, that the Guild is one of the 95 organizations that they partner with. And so it was really cool to be able to continue to hone, some of those skills and to continue to support a nonprofit and make an impact, but do it, for a slightly larger organization and have an even greater impact. And so I've been here at United Way, as I mentioned, for 5 years. My current role is the senior manager of Volunteer United. And, we as an organization, our mission is really focused on helping to improve lives of families and individuals by helping them to meet their basic needs and helping children achieve student success. So in my current role, I really look at, and of course it's changed a little bit, over the last 2 years in this new virtual environment, but I typically look at the work that I do in a couple of different avenues. The first is essentially I'm able to kind of act as a liaison between the 95 plus nonprofits that we work with and our corporate partners. We work with hundreds of corporate partners all throughout Central Ohio. And my goal is to leverage their skills. So essentially the people that they have, right, the volunteers, as well as the resources that they have, and utilize those to support those 95 nonprofits that I work with. The other major part of the work that I do is I manage our new volunteer platform, Volunteer United. And so about 3 plus, maybe 4 years ago, we launched our Volunteer United platform. And if any of you have ever tried to volunteer, you might have found that sometimes it can be a little hard to figure out where to get started and what to do. And so what we've done is we've worked, I've been able to work with 95 nonprofits all throughout Central Ohio and work with them to get all of their volunteer opportunities and events on one site. So essentially creating a one-stop shop for volunteerism. And then beyond that, really just connecting community groups and individuals just like yourself to ways that they could get involved. And so in my current role, again, I can be seen doing quite a few different things and wearing a few different hats, whether that is working with donors, writing, again, donor solicitations, ways that I'm connecting with donors, as well as quite a bit of marketing. I create a lot of marketing materials and, just interfacing with the community and with, key stakeholders. And so that's just kind of a little bit about the journey from, my junior or senior year at OSU to where I am now.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to dive more into that in the Q&A, but that sounds so interesting. And I love what you said about getting to have experience in, so many different areas and wear so many hats and how that can be so useful in that. So I'm excited to hear more later. But now I'm excited to welcome Molly Becker, who is the Senior Manager of Editorial Programs for the Scripps National Spelling Bee, which is based in Cincinnati. She graduated from The Ohio State University in December 2013 with a BA in English and a minor in Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies and a minor in Creative Writing, which is actually very similar to many of our students now. Molly's career thus far has centered around educational editing. She worked for both Pearson and McGraw-Hill Education before joining the Bee in 2016. She is passionate about leadership, language, details, and deadlines, and she is lucky enough to get to embrace those passions daily in her work with the B. Molly is also passionate about football, go Bucks, reading, reality TV, and her family. She lives in Loveland, Ohio with her husband Josh and their dog Chester. So welcome, Molly.
Thank you so much, Katie. And thanks for including a little bit about reality TV. I think we just got to own our passions, everyone, no matter what they are, right? So I am just absolutely honored to be here with you all this evening. I am the most proud graduate of Ohio State. My coworkers are probably very tired of hearing me talk about how much I love Ohio State. And when it's football season, that's all I talk about. So this is truly just a delight to get to speak with you all this evening, and especially about the magic that is an English degree and everything that you can do with that. So similarly to Brandy, I'm going to kind of walk you through my decision process that led me to consider editing as a career path, and then kind of what I have done since graduation. So I don't know if any of you also had this experience, but I did not immediately know that I wanted to study English. I actually changed my major 3 times while I was at Ohio State, and the major just before I settled on an English degree was English pre-education. I am sure that many of you, when you tell people I'm an English major, have gotten the response, "Oh, so what grade are you going to teach?" That was absolutely my case, and I thought I was going to be a teacher. My mom was a retired 4th grade educator, and that was something that I was heavily considering doing with an English degree. So for those of you that are considering teaching, highly recommend that you check out the FEAP program at Ohio State, and that is First Education Experience Program. I participated in FEAP, I believe it was during my 3rd year, and it's essentially, the way I describe it is kind of as like a mini student teaching opportunity. So over the course of a semester, you're placed in a Columbus area classroom. I was placed in an 8th grade language arts classroom in Upper Arlington. So I got to go in, it was actually at that point in time, 4 days a week that I got to go into the same 8th grade classroom, work with the same teacher and the same students every day. And then 1 day a week, I had a seminar in the College of Education and Human Ecology. And that was with not just educators, we had guest lecturers who were employed in the State Department of Education, who came in and talked about legislation as it applies to teaching. And we talked about pedagogy. We talked about the career path for teachers and what it takes to go into administration and pursuing your MED. So a really valuable experience in that it teaches you kind of the whole picture of what going into teaching could look like. For me, FEAP worked in that it did exactly what it was supposed to do, and it gave me an insight into a career in teaching, and it showed me that was something I was not interested in. So you'll hear me, maybe this evening talk a bit about how, for me, some of the most formative experiences in learning what I wanted to do with my degree were experiences that showed me what I did not want to do with my degree. For me, that was a lot of information gathering and a lot of opportunity to say that's not exactly what I want to do. Because as Katie said, as Brandy said, the sky is the limit with an English degree, and that can be overwhelming. So taking pieces of information that help you determine that's not exactly the path can be just as valuable as identifying things that you love to do. So my final semester of school, I had an internship, and it was with Outlook Media, which is an LGBTQIA magazine in the short north. And in that position, I was an editorial assistant. So I helped write stories and write content for their print magazine and digitally. Loved working on that team. It gave me a lot of kind of newsroom-esque experience, we'll say, like magazine room experience, getting to experience what it was like to write in that format. And again, taught me that path of editorial, working at a newspaper or a magazine, is not something I was particularly interested in. Again, a wonderful experience, but really helped me gather that critical information to learn that's not exactly the path I want to go on either. Both the FEAP program and my internship also helped me realize things that I loved to do, which was I loved editing. I really liked working under deadlines. I liked having this kind of organizational process, and that led me to the field of managing editorial, which, if you're familiar with publishing at all, that's a kind of a section separate from editorial. And managing editorial is all about processes and deadlines, and as someone with a type A personality, that is a situation in which I could see myself thriving. So upon graduation, I graduated December 2013, and I was faced with a decision that I'm sure so many of you are going to face, which is, do I go to grad school? At the time, I thought, yes, that's absolutely what I'm going to do. I am a lifelong learner. I love taking classes. I love doing professional development classes now that I'm in my career. But at the time, thought, absolutely, I am going to go to grad school. What held me back from that decision? My personal problem was that I wanted to learn everything. Okay. I was just as passionate about pursuing an MA in English as I was about an MFA in creative writing, as I was about an MFA in writing for children. I considered a Master of Library Sciences. I just wanted to learn it all, right? So had to have a little bit of a talk with myself to say, okay, Molly, if you are equally as passionate about all of these things and you just want to learn it all, is it really the best decision for you right now to commit to 2 years of study at a very high level that's narrow and focused when you can't make up your mind even about what you want to study? So graduating, having student loan debt, and faced with the possibility of adding more debt for an area that I was so excited about, but didn't know if that's exactly what I wanted to do, didn't seem like the right step at the time. So I decided to enter the workforce. My first position out of college was with Pearson Education. Both Pearson and McGraw-Hill Education are located in Columbus, so you have two enormous worldwide educational publishing houses right there in Columbus, which is fantastic for Ohio State grads. So I went to Pearson first. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was glorified customer service. It was not editorial in the way that I wanted it to be, but it was a step in the right direction. I had my foot in the door at an educational publishing house. I was helping professors learn to set up their online courses using Pearson products. So that position at Pearson helped me then get my job at McGraw-Hill. At McGraw-Hill Education, I was an assistant academic editor, and my team worked on the content development for K-5 reading intervention curriculum. Loved that position. It was a lot of fun getting to work on content development. I really liked the mission behind what we were working on. I realized that working kind of education adjacent was very intriguing to me, that I could feel and see the impact that my work was having, and really was able to, again, lean into the sides of things that I had already identified that I loved, which were editorial and specifically managing editorial and that whole process. So about a year and a half into working at McGraw-Hill, I saw a job posting for editorial coordinator with the Scripps National Spelling Bee, which is at the EW Scripps company in Cincinnati. I am originally from Cincinnati, so this was an opportunity for my husband and I to move back to be closer to our families. And once I started interviewing for this position, I realized it was everything that I had wanted in a job and just didn't know it at the time. So I next week will be celebrating my 6-year anniversary with the Bee. I first held the role of editorial coordinator, then editorial specialist, then manager of editorial, and now my title is senior manager of editorial programs. And essentially, when I describe my job to people, I say, think of the word lists. So my team that I oversee develops the content and the word lists for spellers from the classroom level, at which point we have about 11 million students participating nationwide, all the way up to the national level. So you might be familiar with the Scripps National Spelling Bee. If you're not, it is a televised live competition, academic competition that normally happens around end of May every year in Washington, D.C. You see these genius spellers who go up through the 8th grade, go and compete to see who's the best speller in the country. And it is just truly magical to get to witness them shine on stage, embrace their word nerdiness. I'm sure that many of us on this call identify as word nerds, and to watch them find a place where they can own that and claim that about themselves and gain public speaking skills and confidence and learn that it's cool to be smart, and to have them reflect years later on how learning language roots and spellings has helped them throughout their careers. It's just a very rewarding thing to be a part of. So my job involves the content creation and selection of those words, their sentences, their definitions, their etymologies, their pronunciations, all of that content from, again, the classroom level all the way up to that national competition. And now I will toss things back over to Katie. I think we're probably going to answer some questions.
Yes, thank you. That is fantastic. I myself have about 1 million questions and follow-ups, so I'm super excited about this. Again, attendees, please feel free to click the Q&A button and put any questions you have in there. I'm going to kick it off with some questions that we got before. And like I said, I have a bunch of follow-ups as well. So thank you both so much about this. One of the things that I loved about what both of you talked about is kind of the journey of getting the English degree and then into a job, but that your entry-level job is not the job you're in now. And I think that one of the things that can be sometimes difficult, especially when there are so many options, is that how do you kind of make that move? And, Molly, you kind of said, well, my title, first I started here and then I went here, and, first I started almost in glorified customer service. And then here's kind of how my titles evolved. And Brandy, going from, this kind of smaller organization where you're wearing all these hats to then now being in, a management position where you're doing a lot more things. And so if you could both talk a little bit more about that kind of journey, because I think English majors go through a lot of changes, especially in the first 5 years of their careers. And so if you could, I guess, expand a little bit more about that, I'd love to hear more.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy. And then Brandy, I'll kick it over to you. I think, Katie, you're exactly right. There's a lot of transition and finding out what your path is in the first several years of being a new English graduate. And I mean, honestly, I don't even know if it's limited to the first 5 years. I think there's possibility forever, right? And when I talk to people about being an English major, all I think of it is opportunity. I think, that there are just so many majors where it seems like the next step might be obvious. You go to law school, you're probably going to become a lawyer. You go to med school, you're probably going to become a doctor, right? And so I'm sure we all know people who got their undergraduate degree and it was very clear what that next step is. And for English majors, it's kind of like choose your own adventure, right? So for me, it was very much about gathering as much information as I could. And like I said, I did that through the FEEP program. I did that through my internship. I did that through my first several positions, learning what do I love about this? What do I not love about this? One of the things that surprised me the most, I talked about my time at Pearson, the glorified customer service role, was I learned about myself that I loved a corporate setting. I was shocked by that. I was not expecting that at all, but I remember calling my mom my first week of work and saying, I love having my little cubicle. I love having, my office that I come to every day and it's 9 to 5. And that was something that I realized I really enjoyed. So that's a piece of information, right, that I'm holding on to as I'm looking for the next position. And I think it's important to just kind of have this mindset of, even if I know the position that I'm in right now is not the dream, or it's not the end goal, what am I learning right now that's going to translate to my next position? What am I learning about myself and what I want from a job and what I don't want from a job? And one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard, I don't remember who, it might have been a very similar panel that I attended as a student, um, was go find your dream job. If you have kind of a vision in your head, I want to be an editor at a publishing house, or this is the thing that I want to do. Go find that job posting online, read through the qualifications, and then work backward. Go back and say, okay, how can they want 5 to 7 years of experience in this. So how can I start working toward that now? And that is something I kept in mind very early in my career about what are the skills that I'm taking from each of these positions that I know that I can apply as I work toward my eventual goal.
Molly, I feel like you're in my head. I think we're going to say some similar things for
I love
sure.
it.
But of course, as you both have mentioned, it can be very daunting, right? Because there isn't necessarily a guidebook for our career paths, especially right within the English space, just kind of knowing which step to go, to go with. And one of the things that I will lift up when I was at the Guild, right, when I was in my first like full-time professional job, a good portion of the work that I was doing there was administrative. And if you think about it, who better to do administrative work? So I leaned into the skills that I got from, my professional writing minor and from my English skills. I know how to digest, lots of information and how to effectively communicate and create different reports and data and the things that kind of aligned with my role at the time. So I really leaned into the skills that I had, but while at the same time, honing the skills that I wanted. And so I'm a big believer in being a sponge. Learn as much information as you can. I was fortunate that I was at an organization that had a budget for professional development. And so while I was there, I really utilized that to learn skills that I didn't already have, or to hone skills that I wanted to kind of fine tune. But what I will say, we're fortunate here in Columbus. There are so many resources out there, certifications, or just avenues of free or even virtual, ways to kind of develop new professional skills. So quite honestly, just learn as much as you can, because you never know what might be the thing, that resonates with you, and that might take you down a completely different path. But use the skills you have, because you've got a lot of them being an English major. It's not easy, all of the papers and the reading and all of the things that you're doing. Utilize those skills and really hone the skills that you want to develop.
Thank you both for that. I think that that makes so much sense in terms of like what are the things you're already bringing to that, and then how do you develop that in the ways that are interesting to you. And what both of you said is it's always so gratifying when alumni say things that I usually say to students in career advising appointments. So if you've heard me say both things that Brandy and Molly have had, it's really great to hear that these things are actually in practice, and that these things actually are things that you do as professionals, because I think that it is really important to kind of figure out how to apply your skills to different scenarios. And then also, as you said, Brandy, kind of looking on the horizon of how do you further develop them. And Molly, I loved what you said about figuring out what you don't like. I often say, like, knowing what you don't want to do is often sometimes even more important than knowing what you want to do. And so figuring that out, I think, gives you so many lessons that you can then apply to figuring out what you do want to do. And so it's wonderful to hear about that kind of in practice. Brandy, I actually have a follow-up question for you about like graduate school. So because Molly talked a little bit about graduate school, our students often ask about that, of like kind of when you decide to go to graduate school, when you don't decide to go to graduate school. And I guess, so I'd be interested in hearing about your kind of decision-making process about thinking about graduate school, if that was something you were considering or not. But also I'd love to hear from both of you about other types of professional development that aren't graduate school that Brandy, you were mentioning too.
Yeah, definitely. So what I will say, as of right now, I've not made the decision to go to grad school. And a decision wasn't necessarily something that I, formally made. It's just something that I haven't done as of yet. And so it's not something that I'm ruling out. I think that, one of the benefits, I think, to going into the workforce immediately after your undergrad is you start to learn a lot of different things, right? Molly was talking about, you learn the things you don't like and the things you do like. And so you learn kind of what types of career or skills that you like and you want to develop. And so it opens the door for the future to decide if it makes sense based on your unique career path to go to grad school. So I've left that window open. Who knows? I may be, joining OSU once again in the future as a Buckeye, maybe getting my MBA or something like that. But I think that there's definitely something to be said of, spending at least a year or two in the works, working on your career and starting to figure out what are the things that interest you, because you may be surprised. The things you think you may like or may be interested in practice may not be the things that you gravitate towards.
Yeah, Brandy, if you decide to do your MBA, take me with you, girl. We'll do it together. We'll go to Fisher together. I can't wait. And I love that you just said if by getting that experience, what you thought you wanted might change. You heard me mention all of the different master's programs that I had considered. I don't think I would go back and do any of those now. I think if I went back to school, it would be to do something like an MBA. So it definitely changes depending on your career path. And so, Katie, you asked about other types of professional development programs. Since graduating, I've participated in 2 different ones. First, through Ohio State, they have a Young Alumni Academy. Loved it. I was right before the call officially started, I was telling Katie and Brandy about the opportunity that arose because of the pandemic. They opened it up to Ohio State alums all over the country when formerly it was just to alums in the Columbus area and it was held in person. So since I'm in Cincinnati, that was not previously available to me, but they opened it up and it was a 10-month intensive program where we heard from different speakers on lots of different topics. There was a formal mentorship program through the academy where we got to meet with different alums all over the country in tons of different fields. And that was absolutely wonderful. I was able to connect with some wonderful individuals working all over, doing every sort of thing, and getting a lot of good career advice from them. And then the second opportunity, I also work for an organization that has a robust professional development budget for its employees. So I think this was now, time has run together in the pandemic. So I think this was about 2 years ago. I enrolled in an executive certificate program in leadership and management through Notre Dame's Mendoza College of Business. So this was kind of a first step to see if an MBA was something that I wanted to consider. This was only a 10-month long program as opposed to a 2 or 3 year long program of completing an MBA. So absolutely loved it. I, did classes on the weekends. A lot of it was recordings that I could watch later so I could still work full time. So that was a wonderful opportunity that I paid for through a professional development budget at work to kind of pursue more organizational and leadership learning as I was considering advancing in my career.
And I'll just add to that, there's so many different, especially now that we're in this virtual environment, there's so many different organizations that offer virtual trainings and ways for you to develop. As you may have heard Katie mention when she was reading my bio, I'm actually a graduate of United Way's Leadership and Development Program. And that's open to anyone, not just folks that, work at our organization. So there are a lot of different programs like that that will really help you not only develop your own skills, but connect with other folks that can help you develop your skills. And then in addition to that, honestly, right now, I'm actually in the process of getting my PMP, which is my project management certification.
Yay!
So when we talk about, the different paths that you may go down and figuring out what you do and you don't like, I never in a million years thought that project management would be an area of expertise for me, but I've been doing it for so long within my career that I thought, why not formally get this certification and further my, my current career path? So there are a lot of different ways that you can develop. And of course, once you start down your career path, you'll find different opportunities. And if you don't find them, keep looking for them because they're out there.
Yes, I completely agree. And Brandy, I love what you said about the door to grad school not being closed necessarily. And Molly, what you were saying about, how what your ambitions for graduate school might look like or further education might look like are very different from when you graduated. And I think that that's something that is so true, that graduate school is always something in some ways that you can go back to. And graduate programs can look a lot of different ways. A lot of people get MBAs while working, and I think that this is such a great example too of two, professionals who are, still working, but looking at these other, professional opportunities and educational opportunities that might look like certificate programs, or that might look like a master's in a different field, but that's adjacent to the work that you do. And so I think that that's really great. And also knowing too that like there are other times that you can go back and do that. I actually know someone who did a full career and I think like chemistry, and then got a PhD in English when he retired. And so, in terms of, closing, so we're talking like really the door to that was never closed. But I do think, again, like what further education looks like can take so many different forms than we might imagine. And so I love hearing from both of you about two different examples of like what that can look like. And so thank you so much for that. Sort of speaking of the pandemic, our students often ask about like if you have any advice for networking, and especially in the pandemic too, where sometimes it's a little bit harder to kind of be like, oh, can we get coffee or something like that, where there's so many other things going on, but that can also expand too because more people are used to virtual things. But any tips for networking for students?
I'll go first if that's okay. First of all, networking is hard regardless, right? The pandemic or not, let's just be honest. Sometimes it is just daunting and scary to get out there and start talking to people. You don't know where to start, and it can just feel a little bit overwhelming, especially when you're new or very green in your career. So one of the things that I love is that in Columbus, in the greater Columbus area, there are so many different organizations that make networking easy and less scary. And so, some of the organizations that I really leaned into were Columbus Young Professionals, Columbus Urban League Young Professionals. There are all of these different young professional groups that you can join, and their sole purpose is to help you connect with your peers, developing your career, but also connect with those who, are more established in their career and that you can really look to for mentorship. And, they also typically have some sort of service component. So you're also going to be able to give back. So I would look for organizations like that. And they all, especially now, they've done a really great job of creating, content and engagement activities and networking events that are not just in person, but also virtual.
I love that. And I want to share my number one tip is LinkedIn, y'all. Okay. It is a powerful tool. And if you don't have one yet, set one up. I think it's the only social media you need. But I just recently, through the Ohio State Young Alumni Academy, they brought in someone who talked about some of the different features on LinkedIn. And there were things that I was unaware of. So if you go to Ohio State's page on LinkedIn and you go to people, you can search by geographic location. You can search by career title. You can search by kind of field. And I played around with that one day after they taught us this, and it is just, I think, the most incredible thing that I can go on there and see here are Ohio State grads who are living in Cincinnati, whose career title has to do with editing. And then I was like, there are a lot of us out here, right? So it's pretty wonderful. And then you send a nice message. You ask for an informational interview. You say, I would love to chat with you about how you got to where you are today. And a lot of people like to talk about themselves, right? So it's not a super big ask. And actually, I think the pandemic has been a lot of things, right? But it's been an interesting way to get to connect with people. And it's become more normalized to say, can we get on a video call? Because this is the way all of us are communicating now, right? So send a message, say, hey, I would love to have a virtual coffee with you. And can we have 15 minutes to chat about how you got to where you are today? And I have done that successfully with different people. I'm putting out the offer now that I'm on LinkedIn if anyone wants to reach out to me, and I would love to have a little virtual coffee moment with you. But it's really a powerful tool that I think can be underutilized. It's not just for posting your resume and then kind of walking away from. I think if you kind of dig into some of the tools, it can be a really nice way to connect with people.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I think thank you too for the offer of of that. I know some of our students will definitely take you up on it. We have two great questions that just came in the Q&A. And so one of them is, what student organizations were you a part of, and did that help in your career? And so you can answer that, but I also will expand that to say, so thinking about that, but also what other experiences in your undergraduate career do you think would be beneficial for students to participate in? I know you both mentioned internships, but you can talk more about that too.
Right. Yeah, so you've heard me talk already about the FEE program and about my internship. So I'll focus more on the organization side. I was a member of Humanities Scholars. So that was a really lovely way to connect with people in similar fields to my own. And there were a lot of just really wonderful events that they put on at the Honors and Scholars House that were they would, bring in different panels of people to talk about their careers, and that was a really wonderful experience. My other undergraduate student organizations had nothing to do with my major, but were still wonderful experiences nonetheless. And just I think helped push me outside of my comfort zone and just meet people, which might not be directly related to English and the content, but was a wonderful way just to start practicing networking, to start practicing having conversations with different types of people. So those two organizations, I was a member of Buckeye Barbells, which is a female powerlifting group, and then I was a member of the Girls Circle Project, which was run in local Columbus area schools. I originally joined because, again, I was interested in education, but, did it throughout my undergraduate career just because I loved the program so much. But running with a co-facilitator circles of girls aged 9 to 18 about topics like peer pressure and bullying and body image and healthy relationships. And I just loved the women that I met through that program. Some of them are still my friends to this day. I've been in their weddings. I've, traveled across the country to see them since graduation. So some of my closest friendships came from being a part of those student organizations.
I'll jump in. Of course, I've already mentioned the writing and professional minor, but I give so much credit to that program. I think it really, really helped me to hone, even aside from the internship, it really did help me with developing a lot of the professional writing skills that I still use. And so, and a lot of the classes within that program were very helpful and beneficial to me. And I do want to just say, with the exception of the last 2 years, because of the pandemic, I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to host an intern from the program since I graduated. And so that's been a real treat. I was not as diverse in the things that I was doing as Molly was. So I don't know if I can share too many other things that I did do, but for a brief time I was a part of the organization that exists within the English department that helped to essentially tutor and edit English works. I don't know if you all know this. It's a great organization to be a part of because they'll give you training on how you can, edit and support your peers as an English tutor, but also as an English major, it's a great tool to utilize if you ever just need a fresh pair of eyes on a paper for editing, or you want to go over maybe a difficult prompt or paper that you're working on. There are folks that are there to help and support. And so that was definitely an organization that helped me in terms of learning a little bit more about kind of editing and making sure that I was producing the best work that I could, but also it was just a great resource. So those are two of the things that I would suggest.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it speaks to as well, like the diverse experiences of English majors. I always say that there's no two English majors that are exactly alike, either in their curriculum or in their experiences. And I think that that's, to me, one of my favorite things about well, being a former English major, but also working with this population as well. And it's so cool, Brandy, too, to see that. I think I knew you were a professional writing intern, mentor and host, and I think that's really wonderful. I do think we have a great community of alumni who are in a lot of ways, giving back by doing panels like these, or, hosting interns or doing other things. And that's really wonderful. So just remember, students, there are alumni out there who, are interested in, helping and talking with you. We had a great question that came in that I think is always a good question to ask, which is, does imposter syndrome ever go away?
Oh man. I guess I'll report back, right? But for me, it hasn't yet. I do think though it changes, and I love this question. So it's definitely something I've experienced in my career. I have definitely gotten more confident. And actually, I mean, I'll be very vulnerable and share with you all that before this panel, okay, sorry, the dog wants to say hi. This is what it's like. This is what it's like, y'all. This is our foster dog, Harley. And then our other dog is back there somewhere. But right before this panel, my husband said, "Are you nervous?" And I was like, actually, no. I think 5 years ago I would have been nervous. And so for me, imposter syndrome has changed. I don't think it's the same things that I would have been nervous about before, because now I think, well, I am an expert at certain things, right? Like, I don't know if there's anyone more qualified to run a spelling bee, like it's a very, very particular thing, but it's an interesting thing. You gain experience, you start, speaking in front of people more, you start, having a leadership role, and it shifts, and you start to feel like you have more confidence in certain areas. But there's always that next level, right? There's always rooms where you might feel like, is my voice valuable here? Do I know what I'm talking about? So I think that for me, it hasn't gone away. I think the anxiety associated with it has definitely lessened, at least for me, and it's shifted to different situations now, maybe. But I think as far as coping with imposter syndrome, I am a big fan in hyping yourself up. I think you've got to say, there's a reason I'm in this room. There's a reason why they've asked me to participate in this. And so I need to believe that myself, and just be your biggest advocate, hype yourself up, put on a good playlist, and, get things pumping so that you feel like your most confident self.
It's a great answer. I agree. Does it go away? Short answer, no. But if I could give my younger self some advice, it's that you have to be confident in the skills that you have. You all are learning all of the skills and tools that you're going to need to be successful. You have those. You're going to graduate with that. It's just a matter of pulling those things out of your toolkit when you need it. And I think that especially when you're younger in the workforce, most of us are going to work in places where we're part of a multi-generational workforce. And oftentimes, especially when you're younger, you may feel like your voice doesn't matter, or you may experience folks kind of treating you potentially like maybe it doesn't, but you have to remember that you deserve a seat at the table. And if there isn't a seat at the table, you make a seat at the table. You know what you know, and, kind of similar to what Molly was saying, you've got to hype yourself up. The amount of times before I've gone into a big presentation, or I'm, typically like in a calendar year, I may be asked to do maybe 3 or 4 like live newscastings on like channel 10 or channel 6. And I'm always going to be nervous, but I got to do a power pose. And I say, you got this, sis. And you go out there and you do it. So no, it's never going to go away, but you just have to trust that you know what you know, and what you don't know, you'll figure it out.
Oh, I love that.
All right, well, I'm going to watch this part of this clip when I need to hype myself up, because this was the best pep talk I've heard. And I loved it because I completely agree. And I think finding ways to trust yourself is something that I do think you grow into, and ways to do that. And I think, remembering that is one of the hardest things that you can do, but is so important. And so I found that so inspirational. So thank you. Like, and just for me, even personally, I'm like, again, like next time I have a big like presentation I have to do, I'm like, I'm gonna go watch that clip. So I think speaking of things like that, have you faced any roadblocks or kind of difficulties in your pursuit of your degree or in your career, and kind of how do you overcome them? Like how when you got to that kind of point where something might be, if not blocking you, then kind of a point, pressure point or a growth point where you get the kind of growing pains, I think, in your career, and how do you approach those and deal with them?
I'll
Do you
just
want to
add, I
start?
think this, yeah, thank you. I was going to say, I think this kind of is just going to add to my previous point. There were rooms that I was in or spaces that I've been in my career where I felt like I'm too young, right, to be here. People aren't going to take me seriously. And so I just kind of have to reassure myself that, this is where you're supposed to be. But then also I looked for solutions that would make me feel more confident. So one of the things that I do want to lift up that I feel like was really helpful for me is I joined Toastmasters. So Toastmasters is a national organization and they're everywhere. And there are so many different groups meeting all just in whatever city you're in, there's probably at least 50 different groups meeting at different times. But essentially what they do is give you the tools that you need to be able to communicate effectively, right? Being able to get up in front of a room and feel confident and know what to say and to be clear and concise in your word. And so I would encourage you to look into it. Look into it now, because I'm telling you, some of the skills that I learned are how I've gotten through many a presentation and meeting in my daily life. I did not realize going into nonprofit that I would be doing so much public speaking, that I'd be doing, news interviews and everything in between. And so anything that you can do to just help you put your best foot forward, but I would really encourage you to look into Toastmasters.
That is so strange, Brandy. Like I heard someone talk about Toastmasters earlier today. and now you're mentioning, I just wrote it down. I was like, is this a sign from the universe that I need to pursue this? I've absolutely encountered roadblocks, absolutely. And some very similar to Brandy, come from insecurity over being the youngest person on the team. Every person that I manage is at least a decade older than me. That was a big challenge for me. It still can be a challenge for me to. All of them have children. I do not. There are a lot of things that. A lot of obvious differences, between myself and where I am in my life and my career and the people that I manage, and that can be a roadblock. I think with every roadblock I've encountered, you've already heard me kind of mention this, I'm an information gatherer. I love to read. I'm sure that's very unique among English majors, right? But love to read. You see my bookshelf behind me. So I turn to Harvard Business Review. I turn to, different professional development books. I turn to podcasts. I try to seek out experts in the field. You find me Googling very specific things about how do you manage people who are older than you, or, like things like this. I go in search of that information. I think other situations in which I've turned to that, I'm sure, again, many of you can identify with this. I've had very difficult bosses. And that can be a huge roadblock, a huge challenge, right? I was facing a situation in which I was trying to decide, I love my job, but do I leave because this situation is becoming something, that is unhealthy to work in, and having to face those decisions. And again, what did I do? I journaled about it. I talked to my therapist about it. I read articles about it. I consulted experts about it. And by gathering as much information about the situation as I could, by reflecting on what I wanted and what I saw for my future, these are the types of pieces of information that then are going to help you make the most informed decision and help you move through that roadblock instead of running from that roadblock.
I love what you said about it not being something that is like insurmountable. Like it's like it is about how you overcome it, and in some ways too about what you both said about like the process of overcoming it. Yes, thank you. All right, so I have two more questions. One of which I'll leave the more serious one for the second one, but I do have one from Molly, because I can't have the person who is in charge of the spelling bee words and not ask this question.
Oh God, is it a spelling question?
No, I'm not gonna. Okay, I am the worst speller in the world, so I'm not gonna ask anyone that. You must be better than me, but I want to know what your favorite word
Yeah.
and a spelling bee is.
Oh, okay. Well, favorite word and spelling bee might be a different thing, but
Yeah.
this is so funny because we get asked this question a lot. Everyone
Yeah.
who works for the Bee is like, what's your favorite word? And I love that all of our favorite words are not difficult to spell. My favorite word is wanderlust, just because of the feeling that it evokes, right? And so that is my personal favorite word. I think my favorite spelling bee word, just because it is so fun to say, and the kids, like, they love this word, is UWCO. And it is a Spanish volcano, or it's from a South American volcano, rather. It's in the Spanish language, but it's a South American volcano. And it's spelled LLULLAILLACO. And so it's got the 3 double L's in it, and it's so fun to say, UWCO. And it just sounds like so impressive when you spell it, but the kids love that word. And so I get a kick out of that one.
That's an amazing word. And I love the distinction too, because that is an important distinction of like, what's your favorite word versus what's the spelling word. And so, but both of those words are lovely, and I learned something. So that was wonderful. So my last question, which actually is, I think, serious, is for both of you. And I think that one of my favorite things about that's kind of emerged from this discussion is the way that education is ongoing, the way that when you come out of college, it's not like you're this fully formed, like, professional educated human. It's that what you're learning and the skills that you're developing is kind of constantly like something that's in process. And so I think that is such a great lesson, for our students and really for everyone to kind of think about the fact that, like, we're always learning, we're always evolving. But I guess the last thing I would want to know is, like, what do you think those, like, most important kind of skills are to kind of be cultivating and thinking about, and especially for English majors, if that makes sense?
I'll go first if you don't mind.
Not at all.
I feel like there was a very clear theme in all of the courses that I took, specifically within the writing and professional minor, and just kind of a clear theme for my internship and for all of the things that I did, and that is being concise, being clear, and being concise. It doesn't matter what your career path is. I promise you that that's something that's going to help you. Just being as clear and concise as you can be in everything that you're doing, I think, is important. And to know that, the skills that you are learning right now, or the things that you're learning, whether that be verbal or written communication, those are skills that pretty much transcend into every workplace. It doesn't matter what industry you go into. I was kind of sharing with Katie and Molly earlier. My husband was also a graduate of the English department, and he's a software engineer. We do vastly different things, but he talks pretty much all the time about how important it is that he has that foundation, right? That he learned the skills on how to effectively communicate, whether that be, again, verbally or through written communication. So clear and concise, and just knowing that everything that you're learning, you're going to use it. It may look different than you thought. Maybe you won't end up being an educator, but I can almost assure you that you will utilize just all of the verbal and written skills that you're learning through your English degree.
Yeah, Brandy, that was perfect. That is fantastic advice. So I think, you heard me talk about situations that learning about what you don't like. And so similarly, I'm going to talk about some of the stickier situations of being a professional, and how I think some of the most critical skills that are important for success in the workplace are how you navigate some of those trickier situations. So I'm talking about how you receive feedback, and how you deal with, like, disputes in a professional environment. These are 2 skills, like Brandy said, I think that transcend every single industry, and ones that I've had to dig in on, had to research and learn more about throughout my career. But I think it's probably not underscored enough how critical your success, or how much of your success, can be based on how pleasant you are to interact with in the workplace. And that might sound boring as hell, right? Be a pleasant person, but it goes a very long way, taking that communication that Brandy's talking about, and how you communicate with your employees, how you receive communication and feedback when your performance isn't ideal, or when someone has, more critical feedback to give you. And then what do you do when you are disagreeing with someone? And how do you do that in a professional way? How do you handle that? Because this isn't a situation where you can walk away from your coworker and say, I refuse to work with them, right? So how do you navigate those situations? It's a skill. It's a skill that I am still working on. I'm reading a book right now called Thanks for the Feedback, and it's about how you receive feedback well. Even, I think the little asterisk is even when it's off base and frankly, you're not in the mood. So it's been a good read so far, and one that I've appreciated and taken a lot from. So I think, how you navigate the less than ideal situations, how you respond to them is going to go a long way in how your career progresses.
I think those are all absolutely wonderful points. And I think that they're all skills that, English majors are really well set up to develop,
Yep.
In our programs. I mean, think about feedback on assignments that you're getting. Think about feedback for, interactions you're having with your peers and with faculty members you're working with, or in extracurriculars or in jobs that you might have. How that can be there. And I think what Brandy said about, clear and concise communication, I'm constantly saying that too when I teach, writing to students. I constantly say that. But it's even more important in, professional communication. No one's going to read like a 20-page email. What are the points that you're trying to get across? And so these things are always things that you need to be working on. But again, that the English major is going to perfectly set you up to develop those skills and to set you up to be in a position where you can keep developing them as you get into the professional career that you're interested in pursuing, or however that ends up, kind of wherever it takes you. You might start in one area and go into another area, but again, those skills, as both Brandy and Molly have said, are transferable and are true in really any industry that you're going to be working in. And so with that, I just want to say thank you to Molly and Brandy for joining us today. I feel like I learned so much about what I can do with my English degree. I mean, to be completely seriously, I think that this was just such a wonderful discussion about, being a young professional and what it means to kind of take your degree and go into the world with it, and like the different types of things that you can do. And I think that's really empowering, to hear for especially our students, but sometimes we all need a reminder of what we can do and to trust in ourselves, to fight that imposter syndrome. So thank you so much for being here. I will follow up with both of you later, and thank you for our attendees. But have a good night, everyone, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.